Hi, it's Mike. It is fairly early in the morning on July the 4th. It's about, I don't know, probably 7:30 or so. But listen, I wanted to, it's another car video. I'm here on the street. It's a nice place. It's going to be a scorcher today, so I thought I would come and do this early. I wanted to make a video in response to a young man. His name is Gregory Onision. I saw a video that he made. Believe it or not, the video I saw was on Von Helton's channel. And it was a small excerpt, and Von Helton was taking exception to what Onision said. And I gotta tell you, I almost can't say these words. I agree with Von Helton. That hurt. That really hurt. I agree with Von Helton on his opinion in this particular case. We all know who Onision is, I think, or most people do. He has one of the more popular channels on YouTube, millions and millions of hits, hangs with all the popular YouTubers, goes to all the big conventions. He's this young, fairly attractive, rich white guy. Mr. Onision was saying some really bad things about this country, and particularly founders. He was like this, the founders, you know. And talking about our founders, the people who formed this nation, as being these rich old white guys, slave owners, women-beating, witch-burning theocrats, you know, and it just is not the case at all. I mean, at least not completely. And so I thought what I would do is maybe give just a really brief little bit of history, like Onision will ever watch this video, but I feel like I need to respond. Because the part that Von Helton excerpted, you know, Von Helton was pretty upset about it, pretty mad about it, and I got to tell you, I am too. He was talking about, you know, I mean, it was just the gist of the conversation is, why do we celebrate this country? Why do we celebrate America? Why do we celebrate our founders? Why do we quote the founders? Why are they so sacrosanct? Well, there's a reason for that, and that is they are, in fact, to begin with, the founders. Had it not been for these, what were they? I think 54. I think there were 54 men who got together over a long period of time. It wasn't just July the 4th. Okay, they got together over weeks. And Jefferson, who was a young white man, yes, he owned slaves. He was in his 30s at the time. Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence upon being heavily prodded by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, who was in his 70s. Okay, there's your range of the people, the 30s to the 70s. I think there was one delegate there. He might have been from New York or New Jersey. It was about 29 years old or 30 years old. He was a very young man. And that's, to my knowledge, kind of where they are in age. There are 54 of them. And let me just say that they got together over a period of weeks in a hot, stuffy room that was closed up, okay? They were in Philadelphia. They were not in Washington. Oops, sorry about that. They were in Philadelphia at what we now call Independence Hall. I think in those days it was just called the Old Meeting Hall or something. But it's Independence Hall, and if you get a 50-cent piece, one of those, a Kennedy half-dollar, one version of that, you turn it over on the back and you see Independence Hall. Otherwise, you could just Google it, I guess. And what happened was that during those days in June and early July in 1776, it was very, very hot, just sweltering hot. And all the doors were closed. All the windows were closed. There was no breeze. These men were doing this in secret, because had the word gotten out, their necks would have been stretched on the gallows. They had to put this together. They had to decide that they didn't want to be under English tyranny anymore. And they did something that nobody in history before them had ever done. They sat down and they wrote out a list of complaints. They declared themselves independent, and then they all signed their name so that King George, it was George V, so that King George and Parliament could see the names of all the traitors. Okay, they were committing an act of treason, and they were signing their name to it in the name of freedom in this country, okay? And they did this in temperatures 90, 100 degrees over a period of many days. There is a story that Hancock, who was the president of Congress at the time, John Hancock wanted it to be done on July the 1st just because it could be a momentous day, a Memorial Day kind of a thing, whatever. But they didn't get it done till July the 4th. Religion, Mr. Onision, did not even come into the Declaration until a representative named John Livingston of New Jersey, who was an ordained minister, until he spoke up and said, we must have something to do with God, divine providence. He proposed something. There was an argument, there was a discussion, there was a bunch of back and forth on it. Finally, it got included in the Constitution. In the Declaration. In the Declaration, Jefferson had written, okay, a slave owner who had resolved to free his slaves, by the way, had written, all men are free, and had mentioned that the black slaves ought to be free. A man named Edward Rutledge, who was the lead representative from South Carolina, threatened to walk out and take the entire South with him, thereby crashing any hopes for a United States of America, a unified vote. You know, there would have been like the 7 states of America or whatever. So they struck that. He struck. Actually, John Adams came and struck it and gave it to him and said, "Now sign the damn thing, will you?" And so it was ratified. And the part that was in contention with the religion was actually the very last line, and I'll get into that. The thing is, though, these weren't just, for one thing, witch burning happened in a very short period of time in American history in the 1600s, not the 1700s. These people were religious. They were there. The reason that they were there, the reason they came there was for religious freedom. So yes, religion was an issue. But they were not a bunch of theocrats wherein the divine rule of God is what rules the country. They wrote into the Constitution, later on in the Constitution, they wrote in there the separation of church and state, but that was already a concept that had been laid out and endowed in the Articles of Confederation and other papers. What's known as I'm trying to think what you call it, the Federalist Papers, which is a collection of different writings and papers and philosophies that were done at the time. And for one thing, one person that would have really objected to having a real theocracy going on is Benjamin Franklin. He would have just absolutely he would have been the biggest stick in the mud probably of all of them. So you're just completely wrong. You're just absolutely wrong on all those items, just on everything. And it's your right to speak up and say what you want to say. It really is. You can, because there are people who paid that price for you. You don't have to worry about it. You have no responsibility to that. You can just say what you want to and just say, I'm an American citizen, I can say what I want to, I got the First Amendment. Yes, because somebody else paved that way for you. And I'm sure if they were here, they would say to you, you're welcome. Anyway, the last line of the Constitution is really where there was so much contention regarding including God in the I'm sorry, not the Constitution, the Declaration. The last line of the Declaration is where there was really a lot of contention in including God into things. there had been, in the beginning, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That kind of mentioned God. It said Creator, and I guess nobody really was that upset about it. But in the end, where the contention came was the last line. And I'd like to excerpt part of the last line for you, because you really don't seem to have a grasp of this. These men sacrificed, many of them, their lives. They lost their homes. They were, many of them, killed. They lost their property. They lost their money. Many of them were imprisoned. They suffered. Every last person in that room, in some way or other, lost. Every last one of them. The bigger figures like Jefferson and Adams and Hancock and Franklin and some of those didn't lose as much. They had a lot more to lose, and for some reason really didn't lose that much. But everybody got smacked. Every one of them. Some of them, like Lewis Morris of New York, after whom the town of Morristown is named. He had 9 sons. They were all imprisoned. Families had their houses were burned. They lost their farms. There was a lot that happened. People were killed and their wives and children attacked by the British. Once this occurred, once Parliament and the King saw this document, and all had signed it. And it was an act of defiance. It was an act of treason. They knew what they were doing. They knew that there would be consequences, and still they did it, But the last line of the Declaration, I guess the part where you're really going to say that they developed themselves as a theocracy, you should really pay attention to what is being said here, because it is really, really important. And it's one of the things that defines this nation. Some 85 years after this, or was it 85? Yeah, it was like 85 years after this, there came something called the Civil War. And after that, just wars and conflicts and stuff. The War of 1812 was kind of a second Revolutionary War. England came back to get some payback, and they got their butt kicked again. Yay, France. But anyway, the last line of the Declaration, it in part, the part that really it just stirs me. This just stirs up the patriotism in any real patriot's heart. It says, just kind of paraphrasing it, maybe. In mutual agreement of this document, basically they're saying, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, the hand of God, right? With a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. They had honor, and it was sacred to them. They had their fortunes, they knew they were going to lose. Their lives, they knew they could lose. And all they really had left was their honor. It was their biggest commodity. It's our biggest commodity. And I'm sorry, Gregory Onision, if you can't get that part right, if you don't understand that. It's not about slave-holding old white men, theocrats who these wealthy whatever. It's so much more than that. I just hope one of these days in your life you might want to pursue some education. Pick up a book. Pick up an actual published book. You know what I mean? Pick up an actual book, maybe even a textbook. But learn these things, man. Okay? It's so much more than that. It is so much more than that. If you're going to talk, if you're going to exercise your First Amendment rights, I think if a person is going to exercise their First Amendment rights, there should be a requirement that they should have some knowledge of what they're talking. You know what I mean? They should have some knowledge on the subject of which they're speaking before they can just blather on. That's just my opinion. Have a great 4th of July. Have a great day.